welcome back to Dreams Traveled. I'm Kalia, and these are all of the books that I read in 2023. All the timestamps for each book will be below if you're just interested in a specific book, but let's get into the first book.
So it's 2:30 a.m. on July 26th, 2023, and I just finished reading Amy, My Daughter by Mitch Winehouse, written by her father. The book is 288 pages, and I cried so much. He tells some amazing stories. He talks about her childhood. He has pictures in the book, and he really talks about her addiction. And I think through this book, you can learn a lot about addiction, because fortunately, I've never had a family member or known anyone that was addicted to a substance. And you know, she was addicted to Blake, her ex-husband. She was addicted to drugs. She was addicted to alcohol. She also had bulimia, but Mitch never talks about bulimia in the book. You feel like you are there with her, experiencing what it is to be an addict and this roller coaster of highs and lows that she went through. And it's so sad to see someone with so much talent pass at such a young age, and all the albums she would have written, all the beautiful things that she would have done. I love her. I'll never stop loving her. And at the end of the book, he says, please keep Amy in your heart. And he also says that when she was 12 years old, she said, I love life. I live to love. And I really think that she lived life with love. Every interaction she had with someone, how she literally wanted to sing and use her voice to make people forget about their problems for 5 minutes. Like, everything she did was out of love. Such a bright light, such a good book to read. If you love Amy Winehouse, recommend you read this book and you donate to the Amy Winehouse Foundation, which I definitely am going to donate to the Amy Winehouse Foundation after reading this book. I finished it today on the 26th, and her 12 years of passing was 3 days ago, July 23rd. I found that to be very interesting. It just so happened to be that way. Also, Tony Bennett, who she made a record with right before she died 4 days ago on the 22nd, July 22nd, and he died on July 22nd. She died on July 23rd, 12 years apart. That's pretty crazy. This one tore my heart apart. Amy, My Daughter, Mitch Winehouse.
It is August 17th, and I just finished my second book, Think Like a Monk by Shetty. This book was so amazing. There's so many useful tips and tools in this book, and he breaks the book down into 3 parts. So part 1 is let go, part 2 is grow, and part 3 is give. My favorite part and what I gained most out of this book was in part 2, grow. He talks about purpose, routine, the mind, and the ego. What I gained so much from this book was I realized that if you don't serve, you don't find purpose. And for me, I don't really know what my purpose is. He says you'll feel more purposeful and useful when you serve. Service is always the answer. It fixes a bad day. It tempers the burdens we bear. Service helps other people and helps us. We don't expect anything in return, but what we get is the joy of service. It's an exchange of love. When you're living in service, you don't have the time to complain and criticize. When you're living in service, your fears go away. When you're living in service, you feel grateful. Your material attachments diminish. Service is the direct path for a meaningful life. And I was not expecting this, but he basically said that this whole book and what he wanted to get to in this book was service, that we have to serve. And I agree with everything that I just read. And I realized that I really do want to serve my community. I want to serve my family, and I really find purpose and meaning in that. And it's one of those books you want to read again and again and again, like The Power of Now, and I would say this book as well. So you have to read this. 10 out of 10 for like a self-help book. I'll see you in the next book review.
It's September 14th, and I have finished The World According to Garp by John Irving. And this book was given to me by my coworker. He told me that this was his favorite book ever. So he went to the library,
and he put this book in my hands and made sure that I read it. Now, this book is 600 pages, and this is a novel about Garp. We follow his journey before he's born and after he dies. I really wasn't a fan of this book. Was it entertaining? Yes. Could you read 30 pages and it felt like you only read 2? Yes. I just didn't like it. So why did I read it? I basically read it because I just needed to know what happened next. But because I follow his mother and how she got impregnated with him, I was invested in that way. I think had the author started with him at maybe 5 years old, I would not have cared. Something else that I didn't like about this book was that it was very sexual, and I'm not a fan of that. I think that the author placed sex and sexualness in places that they didn't need to be. When he was speaking about Garp's mother looking at a 13-year-old's breasts and wanting a girl, what? But what I did like about the book is that it was published in 1976, but he brings up a lot of different topics. There's a character that's transgender, which is probably, super crazy in the 70s. Garp ends up being a stay-at-home dad, and his wife goes out and works for their 2 children and brings home the cash. I thought that was super interesting for the time of being in the 1970s versus now. I think that's more normalized. So I would probably, for myself, give this book a 5 out of 10. But I would never read this book again, and I probably wouldn't recommend it to anyone. That's what I think about the book, and I'll see you in the next book.
It's September 15th, and I just finished reading Lagom, which is The Swedish Art of Living a Balanced and Happy Life. So you kind of get an insight into the Swedish culture. Lagom, which means not too little, not too much. So they basically live their life by doing everything not too little and not too much. Literally reading this book was so incredible. I got through it so fast. It's only like 280 pages. But it's really not even a book. It's kind of like a guide, and there's like a ton of pictures and some recipes and tips and stuff like that. So it's pretty much a guide to living a Swedish lifestyle. Oh my gosh. Okay, so she talks about fika. Fika is taking a break and having a coffee and maybe a pastry with it. And they have these words for things that we don't have in English, which I absolutely love. So they'll say like, hey, you want to take a fika? You want to have a fika? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And I love that. A fika. I'm going to be asking my friends like, hey, you want to get a fika? She talks about parenting. She talks about weddings. She talks about friendships. She talks about literally everything that is life. She speaks on in this book. It's so awesome. If you are interested in other people's cultures, as I am, because as you can see my channel, I love learning about different cultures. So I've never been to Sweden, but this book really made me want to go to Sweden. What does that look like a person? This looks like a person. This is me, right? That's me moving. And this looks like a man. Is that my man? Let me put my arm around my man. That's my man. Okay. I'm done. I gotta go. But I definitely recommend that you read this book. I give it a 10 out of 10. On to the next. The next book that I read is called Hygge, and I visited Copenhagen, Denmark. I got to experience what Hygge was in that country, but I actually learned more about Hygge, of course, from reading this book. Actually, what I find so interesting is that the Danes are in darkness for a majority of the winter. For 6 months out of the year, it's mostly dark. So they've created this kind of culture of Hygge to be together, to find the beauty in the small things and warm lighting and coziness and cuddling up together and being present together. And I find that to be so beautiful. So I want to read the postscript. It says, Hygge moments are the small everyday moments that make you happy. The best of them are bright and shining like stars. Having a word for it makes you aware that they are right in front of your eyes, ready for you to collect. I think this book has just showed me that life is all Hygge and that there's such beautiful moments like being in my room at night with just candles on is so hygge. Enjoying that with someone amplifies the experience. I just really, really love how they make hygge such a priority, because it's really what has kept them alive and got them through the winter is hygge. I went on a tour in Copenhagen, and my tour guide was telling me that morning she made her son breakfast, oatmeal. In November, it was cold, and he had a bowl of oatmeal and she lit a candle, and he told her, "Mom, this is so hygge." Just that cozy comfort, togetherness, and presence. Now I try to find those beautiful moments in my day-to-day life. I really, really enjoyed this book. If you're interested in Copenhagen and Denmark and hygge and learning more about that, I definitely recommend picking this up. But this is actually not the book that I thought I was gonna get. I give it a 10 out of 10, so I'll see you in the next book. So it is October 19th, and this is the next book that I read. It's called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I was so incredibly excited to read this book. It's only 200 pages. I actually was kind of let down because I think I was expecting more of a broad, more of a vague discussion about astrophysics, but he does get very specific. He's an astrophysicist, so of course he's gonna get specific. I don't know why I didn't think he was going to. I somewhat enjoyed this book. It did get boring after like the first 2 pages of every chapter. I found myself not wanting to read this book, but I really forced myself to read this book. He says in the book that if you were to stand on Neptune, be on Neptune, Earth is a literal blue dot. So what does that make us? That makes us like a trillionth of a dot. Like, we are so small in the grand universe, and I find it so awesome. Some people get depressed thinking that way, but for me, I think it's just so amazing how Earth is in the universe, in the Milky Way, in a specific area. The sun hits it so that it can have water, that we can just all exist on Earth. Like, the fact that we all exist on Earth is so crazy to think about. I have watched so many videos on YouTube of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they're so entertaining. He's so funny. He's such a funny guy, and I absolutely love him. I think I really prefer watching him more than reading his book. A lot of things that he said were amazing, but again, it went in my brain, and after the chapter was over, I forgot everything I read. I would not recommend that a friend read this book, but I would recommend so many YouTube videos, so many interviews with Neil deGrasse Tyson. So yeah, that's my review, and I'll see you in the next book review.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Doing a book review at night? Like,
I have to, because it's about
oh yeah,
astrophysics.
Hi, today is October 31st. Today is Halloween. I finished this book last night. It's called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. I think I'm pronouncing that right, don't know. So basically, I heard about this woman from a Jay Shetty podcast that I really enjoyed, and I know that she has a journal, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone journal, and I was interested in buying this journal, and I thought, let me read the book and see what it's about. I did get the large print, and it was 663 pages. I feel like it took me 2 months to read, but this book was so amazing. I think this has to be my favorite book that I read this year. She's a therapist. She talks about her struggle with breaking up with a boyfriend, about her mortality, and about her 3 clients, her 3 patients that she has. And you just go into their lives, and you come to realize that therapists also are people too. Like, I always think that my therapist is like a perfect person, but like, that's so untrue. She has her faults, she has her worries, she has her struggles, and I think it's just an awesome book to read if you're into therapy and you have a therapist, and you kind of get an insight into a therapist's mind, what they kind of have to analyze when they're in a room with their patient. And the 3 patients she picks are so captivating. Such a good book. You have to read it. 10 out of 10. Made me laugh, made me cry. Love this book. I recommend that you watch her interview on Jay Shetty's podcast, and I also recommend that you watch her TED Talk. All the links are going to be in the description box below. I'll see you guys in the next book. Bye. It's November 18th, and I just finished reading Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This book was extraordinary. It is now my new favorite fictional novel. It is a story about two boys who live in a small town, and a circus comes into town that's very wicked and evil, and they go through a lot of hardship because of the circus. You get to really see their relationship as two friends. You get to see the relationship of one of the boys and their father. And it's just so beautifully written. The way that Ray Bradbury writes and personifies things, it's just this dark novel that is a masterwork of the way that he writes. I could read this book 3 more times. I absolutely loved it. I love the spookiness, the Halloween feeling, and it takes place in October, November. I read it in October, November, so that just made the spooky season feel even more spooky. I absolutely love this book so freaking much. I give it an 11 out of 10, and you have to read it if you haven't read it already. So I will see you in the next book review. It is December 21st, and I just finished reading Build the Life You Want by Arthur C. Brooks and Oprah Winfrey. Now, I came across Arthur C. Brooks on Rich Roll's podcast. He did mention that he collaborated on a book with Oprah Winfrey, and I love Oprah Winfrey.
Who doesn't love Oprah Winfrey?
Build the Life You Want, The Art and Science of Getting Happier. Now, this book is only 204 pages. It's a super easy read, and I actually did learn a lot through this book. So he says that happiness is enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. We find enjoyment through communion and consciousness. So being together with people and being present and conscious, that's enjoyment. Satisfaction is when you work hard and there's a sacrifice. Work your 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, come Friday night, there's a satisfaction like, wow, I did that. And third, purpose. Purpose, finding your meaning. Now, some people, he says, find their meaning in suffering, not necessarily finding your meaning in good ways, because people find meaning in bad ways. I absolutely love this cover. It's so stunning, so beautiful. I love this cover. In this book, he talks about how important family, friends, work, and your faith is. If you don't have those 4 things, it's gonna be not as easy for you to be as happy as people that do have those things. I really enjoyed this book. I plan on reading it again. I would recommend it to anyone, and I give it a 9 out of 10. And the reason that I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is because it didn't blow my mind or change my perspective completely. All right, so that is it for my 2023 book review. I read 9 books from July to December. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.